there everybody, welcome to AutoBears, and let me introduce you to the Porsche Taycan Turbo. Just a few years ago, if you wanted a luxurious electric vehicle, you were pretty much limited to the Tesla Model S. Here we had a car that was big, comfortable and practical, and packed full of tech. It even had a pretty decent range as well. However, there were those out there that simply didn't want to buy a Tesla, and they wanted to wait and see what the more established brands were going to bring to the luxury EV segment. And hey presto, Jaguar came along with the I-Pace, swiftly followed by Audi's e-tron and Mercedes EQ range. Now I've got here the Porsche Taycan, which first showed its head as the Mission E concept back in 2015. Now I've had this Taycan only for a weekend, and I'm going to let you know if it's any good or not as a luxury EV, but also as a sporty one as well. When it comes to styling, of course the Taycan has been toned down a bit when compared to the Mission E concept. Gone are the suicide doors and that very wide and aggressive front stance. However, the car we've been left with is very distinctive and also instantly recognisable as a Porsche. Now yes, the front end is very different to the rest of the range. They've all got internal combustion engines, but that rear is just Porsche through and through. You've got to love that light bar. But also what I love is the jet black metallic I've got on this particular press car. I think it looks very sleek and very stealthy. Even the 21-inch alloy wheels look good as well, and of course they're an optional extra. But if it was me personally, I would go for the Mamba green metallic because I'd want my Taycan to stand out. But let me know in the comment section below which colour you'd have your Taycan in. Would you have it in jet black, or would you go for Mamba green, or maybe something a bit different like frozen berry? But you know what, that's enough of looking at the outside of the Taycan. Let's have a little look at that interior. Sat in the front of the Porsche Taycan, you are greeted by a very elegant and minimalistic interior. However, it does still feel very much like a Porsche. And although this is a four-door saloon, getting in and out of the Taycan can be a bit tricky because the car sits very low. And also these B-pillars are set quite far forward. So if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues but you are after a luxurious EV, I'd probably recommend looking at something like the Jaguar I-Pace or Audi e-tron. But if you have got your heart set on a Porsche EV, then I'd probably wait until next year for the Macan EV to come out, because that would definitely have more SUV-like proportions. But once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that the seats themselves are hugely comfortable and they do hold a big bear like me in place. And as you can see, there is a plethora of buttons on the side of the seat, so there is a huge amount of adjustment. I'm pretty sure if you get the right combination with those buttons, you could probably change bank accounts. Also, the steering is electrically adjustable as well, and there's a little switch underneath, and you have both reach and rake adjustment. But I've got the card switched off, so you'll have to trust me there. And when it comes to build quality, of course this being a Porsche, it's absolutely brilliant. We've got leather here on top of the dash and on the centre console, but also here on top of the doors. But I will mention that on top of the doors, it does feel a little bit hard, but it is soft enough to rest your arm on. And then when it comes to the hard plastics, of course they are absolutely lovely and feel of a really decent quality. However, there is a bit of piano black finish on the dash, and as I'm sat here I can see all the scratches across on it. So that's a little bit disappointing, but you can have that bit as an extra screen, of course, if you tick that options box. Cubby space wise, I'm going to say it's okay in here. So we have got some decent sized door bins, and they are lined with fabric, so loose items shouldn't rattle around in there, but you can only get a small to medium sized bottle of drink in them. Then on the centre console we have got two very decent sized cup holders in terms of size and depth, and also they've got a couple of plastic grippers in them, so it will hold a bottle in place. Then just behind there we have got your centre armrest, which is of a decent size, and you have got two USB-C inputs as well as a 12-volt socket and a little area in which to store your phone so it won't rattle around in there. And then we've got the glove box, which is again of an okay size, but it is a bit difficult to reach whilst you're driving, so I would recommend being stationary or asking your passenger to retrieve any items from there. But also going back to that centre armrest, one of its big issues is when I pop it open and hold it all the way up, if I let go of it, it does near enough fall all the way down. So if you need to reach for anything whilst you're driving, it can be a bit tricky. So that's something that I'd like to see Porsche work on. When it comes to the infotainment system, we have got a 10.25-inch display with very clear and crisp graphics, so it's easy to read when on the move. but it's not the most user-friendly to use when you're on the move because some of the icons are quite small and fiddly and you have got to reach quite far forward in order to touch the screen. But Porsche have thought of this. You see, lower down on the dash we've got a second touchscreen display. Now the top half operates your climate control, but on the bottom half we actually have a touchpad which operates the main infotainment system. And what I love is that you do have haptic feedback and the sensitivity is spot on. It's not like something from Lexus where the sensitivity of the touchpad is just a little oversensitive and you find yourself going all over the screen. So that's a really nice feature and it's definitely a solution to a problem that we've all come across before. Now I did say that the top half of the screen operates the climate control, but something I will mention is that the one thing you have to operate via the screen is the fan direction. Although you have got the fans here, if you grab them, they're actually solid bits of metal, so you can't change the direction yourself. You have to do it via the touchscreen. Now that can be a little bit tricky, especially when you're on the move, but most of the time you kind of set the fans where you want them to be and then you just leave it to it. So I'm not too bothered by that. But I just wanted to let you guys know, just in case you're looking to buy a Taycan, that that's something that you have to look at. Now in front of the steering wheel we have got a 16.8 inch digital dashboard display and it is an absolute joy to behold. The graphics and animations are hugely crisp and clear and it is really easy to read when you're on the move. But the big surprise is actually how customizable it is. I mean, as you're driving you just think it's those 3 preset dials and you just change the information that's set inside them. But no, just like any other Volkswagen Group display, you can actually have the sat-nav on that digital dash, which means you don't have to take your eyes off the road to look at the infotainment system. So that's a really handy feature. But it's also surprising how easy it is to operate whilst on the move using just 2 buttons on the steering wheel, so that is something. And speaking of the steering wheel, I'm actually surprised of how few buttons there are on there. There's actually 8 in total and that's including the 2 rocker switches. And the steering wheel itself just feels really lovely in your hands and is made of really lovely quality leather. So all in all, when it comes to the digital displays and the infotainment system, it all works really well. Apart from the fact that that infotainment system and the climate control, you've got to kind of use together in order to get the fan direction. So that's just something to be aware of. But when it comes to the interior of the Porsche Taycan, you are not let down in here. It is really well made, the materials are wonderful, and it is hugely comfortable and customizable. So I think that's enough of looking at the front of this Porsche Taycan. Let's see what it's like in the back. Sat in the back of the Taycan, it is very comfortable back here if you plan to have 2 adults or 2 kids sat back here. Having 3 will definitely be a tight squeeze. Now that driver's seat is set to my driving position, but it has come back a little bit because of the memory seat function, and I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide. And as you can see, knee room is not too bad, and headroom is not too bad either, but if you are 6 foot tall, you'll definitely be rubbing your head across that glass ceiling. So I definitely recommend the Cross Turismo as an alternative if you plan to have tall adults sat in the back a few times. Also, getting in and out of the back of the Taycan can be a little bit tricky because of that sloping roofline. And yes, I have banged my head on that door frame on more than one occasion. Cubby spaces are what I class as okay. We got some okay sized door bins, you can get a small bottle of drink in there, but we've got no airplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats. But we have got a couple of extra cup holders here in the armrest, but they are in the centre, so if you do intend to rest your arm on it, your elbow is going to go into those cup holders, so just be aware of that. Now on this particular car we have got a couple of optional extras fitted. So firstly we have got the 4+1, which means we have got an extra seat belt to get 3 people sat in the back here, but definitely not adults. We've also got the quad zone climate control on here, so each person can adjust their temperature, which is a really nice feature, and it's operated via a touchscreen system. And we have got a couple of USB-C charging ports, but they're not here or where you'd expect them to be. They're actually here on the base of the center seat, so that's just something to be aware of if you are going to have kids sat back here wanting to charge their mobile devices. Visibility is not too bad either. The door windows themselves are of a decent size. They do allow a nice bit of light in, but they only open about 3/4 of the way down, so that's a bit disappointing. But other than that, it is, pretty comfortable back here. You do sit quite upright, and you can't quite get your feet underneath the driver's seat, or even the passenger one, because they are set pretty low. But yeah, if you want a bit more extra space in here for adults, I definitely recommend going for the Cross Turismo. And on that note, I think that's enough of us being sitting in the back of the Taycan. Let's go have a look at those front and rear boots. Opening the boot of the Porsche Taycan presents you with 366 litres of space, which is quite far off the class best. And as you can see as well, we have got that saloon body shape, which does mean that the opening is compromised. If you want to load any large bulky items, I would recommend looking at the Cross Turismo. But in terms of the Taycan itself, it is a nice square load area, so you can get a couple of small suitcases or a load of weekend bags in there. And it's not devoid of features either. We have got a 12-volt socket, some substantial tethering hooks, a couple of cubby spaces on the outer edge, and also some underfloor storage. I do like as well that it does have a couple of scuff plates there, so you don't scratch the paintwork. But yes, if you are after a more practical vehicle, I would look at something like the Cross Turismo or the Macan EV when that comes out next year. And also at the front of the Taycan, we have got the frunk, which gives you 83 litres of space, which again is quite far off something like the Tesla Model S, but it is a handy little feature. And you know what? I think that's enough of looking at the practicality side of the Taycan. We've got to take it for a drive. Now, when you get going in the Taycan, essentially your first impressions begin when you close the door. And if you've already kind of preset the seat and everything, the car comes to life as soon as you close the door and the seats adjust to how you want it. That's actually a really nice feature. I know it sounds daft, but having the car just come alive as soon as you get in it just means it saves you pressing a button to start the car up. And then once you get going, the next thing you find is that the Taycan feels like a big solid piece of metal, and you feel safe and cocooned inside. And you also feel like you are in something very special and very sporty. Also, the ride and the comfort is actually really nice as well, and you are pleasantly surprised by how well it rides. Now, visibility is pretty good apart from one area. Now, looking out the front of the Taycan, it's absolutely fine. The A-pillars are reasonably thick, but I've not found myself looking around them at any junctions. And when you look over your shoulder, it's actually not too bad because the C-pillar is pretty thin, and that was a pleasant surprise. I do apologise now for the rain coming down if you can hear me still. Now, next comes rear visibility, and that's what lets the Taycan down because it is very much a letterbox view out of the back of the car. Something like the Cross Turismo, I'm guessing, will be better because it's got more of an estate kind of body shape to it. But yeah, out the back of the Taycan, it is just a letterbox view and it is very poor. But as you get driving, you kind of get a sense of what potential the Taycan has. Yes, as I said, it's very nice and relaxing when you get going, but being a Porsche, you know that drivability and that heritage of their sports cars is just lying in wait. When it comes to trim levels in the Taycan range, there are 4 to choose from. The entry-level Taycan, the 4S, the Turbo, which is what I've got here, and the top of the range Turbo S. Now, my pick of the range would actually be the 4S, kind of creeping up to the Turbo. The reason I go for the 4S is even though you get a smaller capacity battery, which means you get less range and less performance, you can pay an option and actually get an upgrade to the battery. You just get all the performance you could really ever use on the public highway, and the range isn't really a huge difference compared to this Turbo. You also get to save yourself a little bit of money, but you have got things like the air suspension, which is standard on all bar the entry-level Taycan, but you also get to add any optional extras you wish to add to your Taycan, because that's one great thing about Porsches, is that you can really customize them to your own liking. This particular Taycan has £15,000 worth of optional extras, and if you check in the description below, you can see what they all are and how much they are at the time of filming. So yeah, out of the 4 trim levels you can choose in the Taycan range, I definitely recommend the 4S as my pick of the range, but if you want a little bit of extra performance, then of course, go for the Turbo. When it comes to batteries in the Taycan range, there are 2 sizes available. Now, if you go for the Taycan and the 4S, it's a 71 kilowatt per hour battery, and if you go for the Turbo and Turbo S, it's a larger and more powerful 83.7 kilowatt per hour. Now what that means is, in terms of kind of brake horsepower, is essentially from the Taycan you get about 400 brake horsepower all the way to the Turbo S with overboost of around 750 brake horsepower. That is quite a range of performance there, and that's why I said that the 4S was my pick of the range, because you do get that smaller battery, but you can upgrade of course for a few extra quid, but it just means you've already got ample performance, you've got adaptive air suspension as well, and you've got a pretty decent range too. In terms of using the Taycan on a public road, the 4S I think is the best of both worlds, but if you do want to upgrade it, then by all means, but then I'd recommend just buying a turbo and getting the extra kit as standard. So yeah, in terms of the performance, the battery capabilities are absolutely amazing, and in terms of performance on this turbo, now the headline figure is 0 to 60 in about 3.2 seconds, and that's with Sport Plus and launch control used. And top speed is around about 160 miles an hour, but then again, top speed's not really the number you're after in these type of cars. It's those 0 to 60 and 0 to 100 times that really impress, and 0 to 100 in the turbo is around 6.9 seconds, and that is hugely impressive. Now of course you've seen all the YouTube videos, you've read all the reviews, and you've seen all the figures, but it still doesn't prepare you for actually how that feels. I do love the headrests on this Taycan, because as they come out, it does mean that you don't have to put your head too far back in order to experience that performance and have your head flung back into the headrest. So that's something I really do appreciate about the Taycan. But yeah, now when it comes to charging the Porsche Taycan, this is where the technology is really starting to move forward. Now yes, you do get a 3-pin adapter as standard with the car, but I'll be honest, unless you're not driving your Taycan, then you might as well just not bother using it. I mean, it'll take a full weekend to charge up the car. If you go for a 7 kilowatt charger, and that's what you get on a lot of home chargers and kind of public chargers, then you are looking at around about 13.5 hours in terms of charging the car, which is not too bad. I mean, if you plug it in at the start of your work day, then yes, when you kind of finish 8 hours later, you'll probably be about 70% there, maybe a little bit more. So at least that way you can get you home. Now if you go for a rapid charger or 50 kilowatt charger, you're looking at about an hour and a half to go from about 10% all the way up to 100. And what I do like in the UK especially is that there is a growing number of these rapid chargers becoming available, so it does mean charging a car like the Taycan with that large capacity battery, it's very doable in terms of doing a long range drive, because you don't have to spend too much time sat at a service station waiting for the car to charge. However, there is one added bonus with the Taycan, and that is the fact that you can do supercharging with it. And in the UK we haven't got a massive supercharge network, but I have plugged the Taycan into a 125 kilowatt charger, and I was just astonished by how quickly it charged up. Now I was already at about 50%, but after about 15 to 20 minutes I was pretty much up to 100, and that was really impressive. But just be aware that using these superchargers is not something you want to do all the time. Just like kind of constantly charging up your iPhone, it is going to cause depletion to the battery. So it's more of a last ditch thing to charge up your Taycan if you're doing a long journey and you just happen to have that capability there. Now with the charging, I do love the fact that the actual charging sockets are on each side at the front of the Taycan. So on the driver's side, on the right hand side, we've got an AC charger as standard. So on the left hand side, we have got both AC and DC capability when it comes to charging. So that's when you can do things like 50 kilowatt and supercharging on that side. And also there is a wonderful little feature in this car where you can just stroke that little blade and it will open up. Of course it is a cost option, as most things are on Porsches. So in terms of charging capabilities, this is definitely ahead of the game against a number of its rivals, and it shows as well that doing huge ranges in the Taycan is doable as long as the charging network is there and available to you. So what's the ride, handling and refinement like in the Taycan? Well, I'm going to be honest, this has been hugely impressive. In fact, so much it's blown me away. Now, as I mentioned, everything bar the entry-level Taycan does come with air suspension as standard, and it is actually really lovely. Now, this particular car has been fitted with 21-inch alloy wheels, and I was really curious to see how the car would ride, especially with tyres that size. I mean, I was expecting it to be really crashy and boomy, going over potholes and just being quite sporty like in its setup, and a bit uncomfortable as a result. But you know what? It isn't. This is actually stupidly comfortable, and I absolutely love it. It deals with the bumps and imperfections really well. Yes, you can feel some of them just kind of boom and vibrate into the cabin a little bit, but it's not uncomfortable. If anything, it kind of lets you know that you're in a Porsche and that there is that sporting heritage underneath, that you can do so much more than just drive it on the public roads. And if you were to take this to a track, you can unleash a huge amount of potential that you'd not see in any other electric vehicle. And then there's the refinement levels as well, and because this is a bespoke EV and not a car with an internal combustion engine that's been turned into an EV, Porsche have looked at all aspects of the refinement. Now, I'm driving through a nice little village here and can't hear anything. I've got no tyre noise, I've got no wind noise, of course there's no engine noise. I've just got this whirring from the batteries, and there is a little bit of a kind of bumps and booms just as I'm going over some rough bits of tarmac. It is impressive how refined this is. Now, it is not all perfect. If you do drive over a poor bit of tarmac, then yes, you do get a lot of road noise coming into the cabin. But wind noise is really nicely isolated away from the cabin. Also, what I love is the Bose sound system you get as standard on this turbo. It's a 700 watt sound system, and it is really crisp and clear, and I absolutely love it. I've been listening to my Apple CarPlay tunes as I've been having the Taycan over the weekend, and yeah, I've just been whacking the volume up and just really enjoying that stereo. It is just so crisp and clear. So yeah, refinement levels are even better. And then you've got the handling, which I don't know how they do it because this is an EV, but this car handles so well. As soon as you turn the steering wheel, it just instantly reacts and darts into corners. But it feels incredibly effortless, and there's a real nice sense of weight in the steering wheel itself. That was a real pleasant surprise. Even though this is Porsche's first ever dedicated EV, it feels like a Porsche. It handles and rides and drives like a Porsche. And that's a really weird sensation to have, considering that there is no engine in this car, and this is the first time Porsche have made an electric vehicle. Also, with this particular car, I have got four-wheel steering as an optional extra, and that is hugely impressive. And it is a bit weird when you use it for the first time, because the back end kind of kicks around with you as you go around a corner. Now, if you're driving at low speed, the rear wheels will turn in the opposite direction to the front to make it super maneuverable at low speed. But at higher speed, it will turn at the same time or at the same direction as the front wheels to make it nice and easy when changing lanes and kind of maneuvering at speed. But yeah, again, the feel is just absolutely lovely. I cannot tell you how impressed I am with the handling of this Taycan. I just really, really love it. Now, another thing with the handling of the Taycan is actually how flat it is going through the corners. It's quite eerie, and it kind of shows that air suspension can working against the weight of the car. Don't forget, this being an EV, it does weigh around 2.3 tons, so it is no lightweight. But you don't really feel that weight as you're kind of driving along normally. Now, if you do push the Taycan in the corners, you can just feel the weight kind of urging the car to move out a little bit, but because it's four-wheel drive, it just grips and holds on for dear life. Even if you put the car in launch control and just set off to get that 0 to 60 time, even in wet conditions, this barely wheel spins. It is scarily impressive how well it grips and just goes. Again, just another testament to the R&D guys at Porsche to get the best out of the Taycan in terms of performance and capability. I mean, as an EV sporty saloon, this is definitely one of the best. Now, if you have watched a number of reviews on the Taycan, you probably would have heard people talking about certain controls being moved around the cabin and not being in a ergonomically sound place. Now, for example, we have got the gear selector, which is on the left hand side behind the steering wheel, and the power on off button, which is on the right hand side behind the steering wheel. But I actually don't mind them being there. In fact, it means that you have got this nice clean interior, and it just means as well that the design isn't fussy as a result. So with my time in the Taycan, are there any little niggles or anything that I need to let you guys know about? Well, the one that does stand out, and I didn't mention this earlier, is that there is like a little shelving unit underneath the lower infotainment screen. But I actually realised that's not for practicality purposes, because this actual screen lower down does get quite hot, and as a result, as you put your hand near it, it does generate quite a bit of heat, and behind there are actually some cooling fans or ducts there. So I understand why that's not a shelving unit, but don't be annoyed just because you can't put anything there. But other than that, no, the Taycan has been absolutely amazing. It has exceeded my expectations. I think the only other thing I would change is just that piano black on the dashboard, because I can see the scratches on there, or at least I'd go for the optional extra of having an additional screen. Granted, I can't use it, but I'll just let one of my passengers use it. But then there is, of course, as I mentioned, the rear visibility, but that happens to be because it is of a saloon shape. But other than that, no. The Taycan really is bloody perfect. So, what are my thoughts on the Porsche Taycan Turbo? Well, I'm going to be honest and say that this is arguably one of the best EVs you can buy, period. In terms of an electric car package, it just has everything. The charging capabilities, the performance, the range, the way it rides, the way it handles. It's just absolutely perfect. And yes, Teslas can go for longer and they cost less, but they're not Porsches. And my hat's off again to the R&D team at Porsche, because they have made this into something truly special. Now, don't forget, Tesla had the Model S and the Model X, and they openly admitted that they were more expensive than they should have been, but they were able to do that in order to fund the development of the Model 3. So that's something to take into consideration when looking at the Taycan. But as an EV package, it's absolutely amazing. Now, as a car, the Taycan is flawed. Now, firstly, in the UK, we don't sell that many saloon cars, so to come out with a saloon as a first EV seems like a bit of an odd direction for Porsche to go, but I completely understand why they've done it, because they want to show their intention in taking on the Model S. And also, a lot of manufacturers, when they're making their first EV, they tend to kind of base it on one of their cars which doesn't sell in huge volumes. Look at Kia, for example. Their first EV was the Soul. I mean, that's a very surprising car to make your first EV from that Korean company. However, people had got a taste of it and saw that it actually had a huge amount of potential, and then voila, we have the e-Niro, which has been a hugely successful car for Kia. So that kind of shows what Porsche's intentions were. They wanted to show the world what they could do as an EV. But also now we have got the Cross Turismo, and as I said, next year we have got the Macan EV as well. But also, there's another reason why they've come out with the Taycan as their first bespoke EV, and that's getting new customers to the brand. You see, someone who's got a 911 is not going to jump straight into a Taycan straight away. They'll want to stay in that 911. However, somebody who wants an electric car and doesn't want a Tesla, this is the perfect car to go into. And all of a sudden, as they fall in love with it, they're going to want more, and they're not going to leave Porsche as their brand, especially as more EVs come. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Porsche Taycan Turbo. because I really love this car, even though I've only had it for a weekend. Now, of course, don't forget to like, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the AutoBear, bring out a new video. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and always recommend you follow me on there for additional content, including live videos and still images. But guys, if you have any questions about the Taycan and my limited time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. But I have really been hugely impressed with the Taycan. It is, as an EV package, as I said, absolutely perfect. Now, if it was my money, I would buy the Cross Turismo. I just want that more estate shape and just a little bit of extra ride height. And also the capabilities are increased as well, because it is a bit of a soft roader, so there is that angle to it. But for a first effort for an EV from Porsche, it's a 5-star car. There's no doubt about it. And I have been hugely impressed by it. So guys, don't forget to stay safe, don't forget to maintain your social distancing, wear a mask where necessary, and wash your hands. And I will catch you all in the next video. So take care, virtual hugs, and bye-bye. Every single time that catches me off guard.